Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Joining me today is my most adorable co host, Nora, the learner initiate of lore and junior storyteller in training. And now we're going to be picking right back up where we left off last time, taking a look at the monk class abilities and specifically giving a little bit more of a breakdown on which ones are really going to help you be an absolute wrecking machine of a damage dealer on the battlefield. So let's dive right into it, shall we? Where we left off last time was taking a look at the chi pool abilities. Now, with this pool, this just gives you a suite of other abilities that allow the monk class to get more mileage out of the gameplay. Not all are great, but, for saving at least 1 point in your chi pool, you get to treat your attacks, or your unarmed attacks specifically, as magic along your alignment, and eventually adamantine, meaning you're overcoming damage reduction and overcoming an object's hardness pretty readily and pretty easily. Handy to have, but there's other ways to get it earlier in the game. And when I say having your strikes aligned with your alignment, I like being flexible when it comes to monk alignments. I've never understood why they had to be lawful, neutral, or restricted to any particular alignment or lose their abilities in 3rd edition or Pathfinder. So hopefully your DMs are allowing that degree of flexibility, but you never know. But where we really start to see these abilities shine are getting an extra attack. 1 extra attack at your full base attack bonus, and it's only for the 1 turn, but this means you're throwing out an attack with good odds of hitting so you can pump out more damage. You can also increase your speed by 20 feet for 1 round. You're not using this all the time, but coupled with the fact that you already have a high degree of speed available to you, and running multiplies your speed by 4, you can cover a great deal of distance really fast. And then you can also use this to kind of patch up your defense a little bit by giving you a +4 dodge bonus to your AC for 1 round. So if you're needing to blast through an area at high speed, throwing this on there to boost your armor class even further will be really helpful when it comes to dealing with those attacks of opportunity. Then we also get the slow fall ability. Treant Monk actually codes this one as a red, but I still find this to be a bit more useful. That's because I and the many other DMs I've played with make use of fall damage. Now, fall damage occurs after your character has fallen a certain amount of distance. You start taking 2d6, 4d6, 6d6. So the further you fall, the more damage you take, and slow fall treats this as if you fell from a shorter distance. So, handy to have. It's not always going to come up, but, when it comes to not having to take as much damage as you normally would, I'm all for having these different little abilities. And then another one that I disagree a little bit with Treant Monk on is the high jump ability. Now, high jump was rated yellow. I rate it more as a green ability. And the thing is that this boosts your acrobatic skill when it comes to jumping and the like. And when you're running and you're boosting your speed, you're going to cover more distance easily. So this just helps with your mobility overall. Now, flying is still better to do. Flying is just about the best in maneuverability. Jumping heights and distances don't really matter so much when you can just fly over whatever obstacles are in your way. But where magic isn't readily available to you or is somehow blocked, this is still going to be really handy. Circumstantial maybe, but still very handy to have. Purity of body. It's immunity to disease. It's nice to have, but I do count this as a green for me because it applies to supernatural diseases like mummy rot and lycanthropy, which, for those of you that don't know, lycanthropy is what causes werewolves, were-rats, were-bears, were-tigers, all sorts of were-creatures. And these are diseases and they're curses. Now, there was some back and forth on this throughout many forums, but most of the official responses I've seen count these curses as diseases as well, because the disease has to take effect for the curse to take effect, and then the curse sustains the disease, etc., etc., etc. So if the disease can't take effect, then the curse can't come in, and so on and so forth. But depending on how you're playing it, especially with your DM, and you definitely need your DM's permission at first. And for some of you, I recommend, on occasion, maybe playing around with this. Just because the disease doesn't affect them doesn't mean they can't be a carrier for the disease necessarily. I mean, obviously, if you rule that to be such, then yeah, no point in arguing it. But still, fun idea, especially if the monk's already evil anyways, because that's just a cruel thing to do. But then, next up, we have abilities like Wholeness of Body. Wholeness of Body, I almost rate this red. Treant Monk definitely calls it more of a yellow, and it's... The thing is, what it does is for 2 chi points, it heals you, but it only heals you for 1 hit point per monk level. So at level 15, you're healing 15 points of damage. At level 20, you're healing 20 points of damage, which... that's a drop in the bucket, and all the mechanics behind healing anyways. Healings, it doesn't matter if you have 100 hit points or 1 hit point, you're still every bit as effective as a person with full health. The only reason that this doesn't descend to being totally red is if you're really in a tight spot and there's no other way to keep yourself alive, this will do that. But normally this ability doesn't amount to much, and those chi points could be better spent on many other things, like beating the crap out of whatever it is that's trying to kill you. Moving on from there, we get to Improved Evasion. I really like this one. Treant Monk rates it a yellow, but I consider it green just because it comes back to preserving hit points when you don't really have many to be saving in the first place. God, that was a close one there. Here you go, little one. Oh, goodness. So greedy, going for the whole stack. She knows not yet what she delves into. You're not ready for this kind of knowledge. Not yet, little one. Wait until we have sharpened your mind and strengthened your body further. Now then. With evasion, although your reflex saves are great, dice inevitably will turn on you. And this is a great way to save on all of that damage. As what this does is if you fail on your save, you're still only going to take half damage. And then if you do make a successful save, you're still saving against all the damage. So all around, this is still really handy to have. And then we come up to Diamond Body. Now, Diamond Body is great because unlike diseases, poisons do happen more often, and having immunity is fantastic. It's another way to save on damage, ability score damage, anything related to poison you are now immune to. It's definitely a blue for me. And then, one of the best abilities you will get, Abundant Step. Basically, you get to use the Dimension Door spell as a class ability. It does cost 2 chi points, which is a bit expensive, but you know what? For the maneuverability you get out of it, this is fantastic to have, and it only costs you a move action, meaning if there's a whole lot of bad in your way, and there's an important target at the other side, like a spellcaster, you can just Dimension Door right past it all, get right next to the spellcaster, and still have an action left to say, I don't know, grapple them and tie them up and make it really difficult for them to cast any spells of any sort. Definitely a blue ability. Nothing like a frozen rag for all your teething baby needs. Anyways, coming back here, we have the juicily class appropriate, thematically appropriate Quivering Palm skill. Think the 5-finger death touch from Kill Bill, or the death touch, or any sort of martial arts legendary, I'll kill you with a single touch sort of strike. Now, I do agree that this is not as great an ability as a lot of people say. What it does is you strike your target, deal damage to them, and then the effect settles on them. It doesn't activate right away unless you want it to, which usually in the middle of a fight you want to activate it instantly to kill the target and then have the fight over. But for roleplay purposes, it makes sense that you'd have this hanging over them like a Doom of Damocles sort of thing, especially if it's somebody you don't necessarily want to kill. Just kind of get them to back off a little bit. Now, the effect will stay on your target for a number of days equal to your class level, which is handy. But the thing is, in order for it to work, you have to decide that you're going to kill them, and then the target has to make a fortitude save, which is where this ability gets to be a bit a bit dicey in its usefulness. It's still a handy one to have, but the difficulty that has to be matched is 10 plus 1/2 your monk level plus your wisdom modifier. And by the time you get this, a lot of enemies and creatures are going to have really solid fortitude saves. But when this thing works and you insta-kill a target, oh god, it works out so well. Handy to have, but not one that's going to be working for you all the time. What stops this from being a worse ability is that it doesn't stop you from doing damage. You can still use this as part of your flurry of blows. You can use this in conjunction with Stunning Strike and Medusa's Wrath, though not all at the same time. So it's still handy, doesn't stop you from doing damage, but the effects could be better, but certainly you could do a lot worse. And then we have Timeless Body as an example of doing worse. Now, again, this is one I think is a bit thematically appropriate, given, it's through so many kung fu films and martial arts stories of all sorts. You have those ancient wizened masters that are still incredibly lethal and physically adept despite their venerable ages. And that's what this does for you. As you age, you don't take the physical penalties to your strength or dexterity or constitution, but you gain all the benefits of aging, having boosts to your intelligence and wisdom scores and the like. So that's great, but the thing is, those scores only come in as your character ages, and even if you were playing a human character, that's going to take a couple of decades in most instances, unless you're already playing a really old monk, which, I think that'll work. But if you're playing a really old monk, then you're taking penalties to all your scores. And this will help with that, but it just gets into a bit of a mess. And we're looking at this from more of a mechanical perspective. I love the idea of playing an already middle-aged or even venerable-aged monk, but, for the most part, most people generally play characters closer to their age, or younger, or maybe a little bit older. And really, based on that, the only time when this ability is going to come into play is if there are a significant amount of time skips or something to that effect, and that's also going to create problems because we're playing a dwarf. You're not going to be venerable age till you're 400 or 500 years old, and since your party's got humans, halflings, half-elves, most of those characters are going to be dead by then. So that is really only going to come up in really long campaigns. And then we get Tongue of the Sun and Moon. And basically what this does, it lets you use the Tongues spell as a spell-like ability. You can understand and speak to anyone in any language. This is an ability that's an odd one for a monk, because you have no social skills whatsoever. It's handy for roleplay, I guess. You're never going to be left out of the loop on anything. But this doesn't come in until level 17, and most campaigns kind of either are done, forgotten about, or moved on from by this point. And it's just a really late one to get. Wizards and clerics and the like have had abilities like this for forever by now. So, great. They don't have to use a lower level spell on you, but Moving on, we have Empty Body. Now this one is actually really handy. You go ethereal with it. You essentially enter the ethereal plane like ghosts do, like phase spiders and all sorts of creatures, and you get all the benefits of that. So it is really useful, but again, kind of comes in late at level 19, and like Trinket Monk says, most campaigns never hit this point. Then, to cap it off, the Monk's capstone ability, the granddaddy of everything they get, is Perfect Self. You essentially, at level 20, you get outsider-type traits. And outsiders are creatures like angels, demons, archons, anything from the planes of Acheron, Hades, the Abyss, any creatures that are born or created outside of the realm of mortals. So, and what the specific traits that you get are all centered on how spells and magic effects work on you. For example, things like Charm Person no longer work on you, which is actually pretty nice. But then you can be blocked by spells that protect against law, or whatever your alignment may be, if your DM's being flexible. You can still be brought back from the dead, but this ability just amounts to things being. It's neat to have. It's not great, but it's neat. It's certainly not one that hurts to have handy. So those are all the monk class abilities here. Again, the monk gets a huge suite, a massive array of different abilities that really tie in and work really well for being a damage dealer. But given the emphasis and reliance on so many different ability scores, you can see how there's a lot of confusion as to what you should be building your monk for. But with this particular build, like I said, we want to focus on being a damage dealer, and the monk is absolutely a wrecking machine, especially once you get into higher levels. They can really easily outpace some of the other classes if you're following this particular build. You're not going to be absolutely head and shoulders above them, but even though you're keeping pace in one area, you're making up for potential deficiencies in a lot of others, like your touch armor class and your flat-footed armor class. Well, not flat-footed, but we'll cover those types of armor classes later when we want to compare this with the fighters, particularly the different fighter builds already discussed here on the channel. And we'll be discussing that right along with your combat maneuver defense and your combat maneuver bonus and how those particular things work specifically to Pathfinder. With that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Nora has been your learner initiate and my most adorable co-host ever. Thank you all for your time. You folks have yourselves a good night. Oh, before we go, if you enjoyed the video today, maybe consider giving us a like. And if you've been enjoying the content that I've been producing here so far, if you're feeling up for it, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. You can always use more subscribers there to join the ranks. But with that said, once again, we have been your hosts, and we hope you all have yourselves a good night.